The first time I realized something was wrong, it wasn't because she touched me. It was because she didn't. I keep replaying that night now, the one hinted at in the title everyone clicks for. But the truth is the story didn't start in a bed. It started weeks earlier, under fluorescent lights that hummed too loudly, with a woman who knew exactly where to stand so she didn't crowd you. I was working late at the repair shop where I fixed industrial printers and office machines, the kind nobody notices until they stop working. My girlfriend had stopped by to bring me dinner, then left in a hurry, already half on the phone with someone else. Before she pulled away, she said, "Hey, my best friend's inside." She said she'd wait. That was how I met her, or really noticed her. She was sitting on a stool near the parts counter, legs crossed, reading the same page of a paperback without turning it. Mid-40s, maybe older. Dark hair pulled back like she didn't want it in her way. She looked up when I approached, calm and curious, like she'd already decided something about me and was waiting to see if she was right. "You must be tired," she said. Not as a question. I shrugged. "Comes with the job." She smiled, small and knowing. Not flirty. Not warm either. Just aware. Her name sounded steadier than mine when she said it. She didn't rush the introduction. Didn't fill the silence. She glanced around the shop like she was cataloging details for later, the grease-stained floor, the broken machines lined up like patients. We talked the way strangers talk when they don't need anything from each other. About how late it was. About how the coffee place down the street had closed. She mentioned she hated sweet drinks. I told her I drank mine black because it felt honest. She laughed at that, a quick breath through her nose, like she didn't want to encourage me too much. At one point, I dropped a screw while reassembling a printer. It skittered across the floor and vanished. I crouched, irritated, and before I could say anything, she was already down there too, skirt folded carefully under her knees, scanning the concrete. "I've got it," she said, reaching before I did. Our hands brushed. Barely. Just enough to register heat. We both froze. Not dramatically. Just long enough that the hum of the lights felt louder. She pulled back first, straightened, and handed me the screw like it meant nothing. But her fingers lingered a second too long. I noticed because I wanted them to. "You're good at this," she said, watching me work after that. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't want her to explain. When my girlfriend came back to walk her out, she touched my arm lightly, right above the elbow. A thank you touch. Polite. Measured. But she looked at me when she did it, not at the spot she touched. Later that night, after the shop was quiet and I was alone, I realized I could still feel the weight of that moment. Not the touch itself. The pause before it. The way she'd looked like she was choosing restraint instead of instinct. And for some reason, that was the part one couldn't stop thinking about. The second time we spent real time together, it felt less accidental. My girlfriend volunteered me without asking. Her friend's car wouldn't start, and I was good with things like that. She said it casually, already scrolling on her phone, like this was just logistics. I nodded, grabbed my jacket, and told myself it was nothing. Her apartment was on the third floor of an older building that smelled faintly like dust and lemon cleaner. She opened the door before I knocked twice, like she'd been listening for me. Same calm expression as before, but her hair was loose this time, falling where it wanted. I noticed because she didn't bother tucking it back. "Thanks for coming," she said. "I know it's late." "No problem," I said. It was a problem. I just didn't want to name why. The car issue turned out to be a dying battery. I explained it while we stood in the parking lot, cold creeping up through my shoes. She listened closely, head tilted, hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater like she was trying to stay contained. "You always talk like that?" she asked. "Like you're teaching, not selling." I smiled. "Habit." She smiled back, slower. "Tired." There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes that hadn't been there under the shop lights. They didn't make her look older. They made her look like someone who'd stayed up late too many nights thinking things through. While I worked, she sat on the curb, arms wrapped around herself. She didn't hover, didn't distract me with questions. Every so often, she'd glance at her phone, then turn it face down again. That caught my attention more than if she'd answered it. "Everything okay?" I asked. She hesitated. Just a beat too long. "Yeah, just a lot lately." She didn't elaborate. I didn't push. The space between us filled with something unspoken. I realized I was watching her hands when she spoke, the way her fingers flexed like she wanted to reach for something and didn't know what. When the car finally turned over, she let out a laugh that surprised both of us. It wasn't loud. It was relieved. She covered her mouth after, like she'd revealed too much. "Thank you," she said. "Really." We stood there longer than necessary. The engine running. The night quiet except for distant traffic. I should have stepped back. I didn't. "You look exhausted," I said before thinking. She looked at me then, fully. No smile. No defense. Just honest. "I am." Something in her shoulders loosened when she said it, like admitting it took effort. She brushed her hair behind her ear, then dropped her hand, unsure what to do with it. "I forget sometimes," she added, softer, "that people notice." I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself to. Instead, I nodded, slow, letting her see that I did. When she hugged me goodbye, it was brief, careful, but as she pulled away, her hand stayed on my arm, right where it had been the first night. This time, neither of us moved right away. "Drive safe," she said. Her voice was steady. Her grip wasn't. I walked back to my car with the strange, heavy awareness that something had shifted, not crossed, just leaned toward. And as I drove off, I knew I'd feel that pause again later, when everything was quiet and there was nothing left to distract me from it. The night everything almost tipped over started with rain that wouldn't commit. Not a storm, just enough to keep you indoors and restless. Her car battery died again, 2 weeks after I replaced it. She called, apologized twice before I could answer properly, said she didn't know who else to ask. I told myself I was being helpful. I told myself a lot of things. By the time I got there, the rain had soaked through my jacket. She handed me a towel without comment, washed while I dried my hands like she was memorizing how I moved. The apartment felt warmer than before, the lights lower. There was food on the stove she hadn't touched. "It's not the battery," I said after a quick look. "Starter this time." She sighed and leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. Figures. I offered to drive her to work the next morning. She hesitated, then nodded. That nod felt heavier than it should have. We ate standing up, plates balanced in our hands. She picked at her food, listening more than talking. "At some point," she said, "I don't usually let people help like this. Not defensive, just factual." "I know," I said. And I did. She glanced at me, searching. "How?" I shrugged. "You make it look like you've got it handled, even when you don't." Her mouth curved, but her eyes didn't follow. She set her plate down untouched. "That's a bad habit," she said. Then quieter. "It gets lonely." The word hung there. She seemed surprised she'd said it. She turned away, busying herself with rinsing a plate that didn't need it. The rain tapped harder against the window, filling the silence for us. Her phone rang. She stiffened, looked at the screen, let it ring twice before answering. "Yes," she said. Then, "No, I can't talk right now." A pause. Her jaw tightened. "Because I have company." She glanced at me when she said it. Not apologetic, just aware. After she hung up, she didn't explain. I didn't ask. External pressure, unspoken but present, sat between us like a third chair. "I should probably go," I said, though neither of us moved. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, probably." We stood near the door, closer than necessary. I could see the faint scar near her collarbone I hadn't noticed before. She noticed me noticing and pulled her sweater up slightly, then stopped halfway, hand hovering like she'd forgotten the point of the gesture. "Thank you," she said, "for not making it weird." I almost laughed, almost said something reckless. Instead, I said, "Anytime." The rain eased. The quiet rushed back in. As I reached for the doorknob, she said my name. Just once. Soft. I turned. We were close enough now that I could smell her soap, something clean and familiar. Her hand lifted, not quite touching my chest. It hovered there, uncertain. She swallowed, opened her mouth like she was about to tell me something that had weight. Then a knock sounded from down the hall. A neighbor. A door slamming. The moment cracked. Her hand dropped. She stepped back. "Drive safe," she said again, steadier this time. I left with my hands shaking slightly. The rain finally stopping as I hit the stairs, carrying the ache of what almost crossed the space between us and didn't. We didn't talk for a week after that night. Not intentionally. Just a quiet agreement neither of us named. My girlfriend mentioned her in passing once, something about lunch plans, and I nodded like my chest didn't tighten. I kept busy, fixed things that didn't matter, slept badly. Then she showed up at the shop, middle of the afternoon. No warning. She stood just inside the door like she wasn't sure she was allowed to take up space there. The noise of machines filled the room, but it felt muted, like everything else had stepped back to watch. I was nearby, she said. I wiped my hands on a rag that was already clean. Okay. We stared at each other longer than polite people do. She looked thinner somehow, tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. Can we talk? She asked. I led her to the back room, where broken machines waited for parts. The door closed with a soft click that sounded too final. We didn't sit. Standing felt safer. She folded her arms, then let them drop. Tried again. This can't keep feeling like this, she said. Not accusing, just worn down. I nodded slowly. I know. That's the problem, she said. You know, and I know, and we're still pretending this is just favors and timing. The word pretending landed hard. I stared at the floor, then back at her. What do you want me to say? She laughed once, sharp and humorless. I don't know. That's what scares me. Silence stretched. A machine hummed somewhere behind the wall. She looked at her hands like they might explain something if she watched long enough. I've spent a long time being careful, she said. Making the right choices. Not asking for things I can't afford to lose. I waited. My throat felt tight. And now, she continued, voice lower. I walk into rooms and feel like I've already done something wrong just by wanting quiet. Or being seen. Her eyes lifted to mine then. Held there. No smile. No defense. I don't know what we're doing, she said. But I know I can't keep standing this close to you and pretending it doesn't mean anything. I should have stepped back. I didn't. I should have said something clean and responsible. I couldn't find it. Instead, I said, I'm trying not to ruin anything. She nodded, slow. So am I. We stood there, close enough that the space between us felt intentional. Charged. Her breath caught once, then evened out. She looked like she might reach for me. Or leave. I couldn't tell which would hurt more. I don't trust myself around you, she said finally. The words weren't dramatic. They were quiet. Honest. And they shifted something I couldn't put back. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. My hands curled at my sides, useless. She took a step back, creating distance she clearly didn't want but needed. Her voice softened, almost breaking. I just needed you to know, she said, that this silence isn't nothing. It's me holding on by choosing not to touch you. She turned toward the door, paused with her hand on the handle. Without looking at me, she added, barely above a whisper, if I stop being careful, I don't know who I become. The shift didn't come with a confession. It came with a small, ordinary thing she almost didn't show me. She asked if I could help her move a box. That was the excuse. My girlfriend was out of town for a conference, said it casually like it meant nothing. I told myself that mattered. The box was lighter than it looked. Old papers. A few books. We carried it into her living room and set it down. She knelt to open it, then stopped. Sat back on her heels like she'd forgotten why she'd started. You don't have to, I said. I know, she replied. Then, after a beat, but I want to. She pulled out a small photo album. Not the curated kind. Just loose sleeves, edges bent. She flipped through without commentary until she stopped on one photo and held it out to me. It was her, younger, early 30s maybe, standing beside a man with his arm around her shoulders. He looked relaxed in a way people don't fake. Familiar. That's Daniel, she said. I nodded. Didn't ask. He died, she added, not dramatically, like stating a fact you'd already accepted. I felt something settle in my chest. Heavy. I'm sorry. She shrugged. It was a long time ago. Then, quieter, longer than it feels. She took the photo back and slid it into the box. For a moment, I thought that was it. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. I shouldn't still have this, she said. But I do. She tapped the screen, hesitated, then handed it to me. A voicemail, dated years back. She didn't play it, just held the phone between us, offering the weight of it without the sound. He used to leave these when he worked late, she said, just to remind me he'd be home. I didn't listen. It felt like crossing a line neither of us needed crossed. You don't sound like him, she said suddenly, watching my face. That's not it. I stayed quiet. It's the way you look at me, she continued. Like you're noticing something I stopped checking for. Her voice didn't waver. Her hands did. I didn't expect to feel this again, she said. And I don't mean romance. I mean the way time gets louder when you're near someone. Like it's asking a question. I swallowed. I don't want to be a replacement. She shook her head immediately. You're not. A pause. That's what scares me. We stood there, the box open between us, the past laid out without drama or ceremony. She took the phone back, slipped it into her pocket like she'd decided something. I'm not asking for anything, she said. I just needed you to know why I keep stepping back. And why it doesn't work. I nodded, heart beating too hard. Thank you for trusting me. She smiled then. Not tired. Just sad. And something else. Softer. As I left, she walked me to the door. No touching. Just close. Sometimes, she said, hand resting on the frame. The worst part isn't losing someone. I waited. It's realizing you're still capable of wanting, she finished. I drove home with that sitting beside me, quiet and undeniable, like something fragile I hadn't agreed to carry, but now couldn't put down. The night it settled didn't feel dramatic. No rush. No breaking point. Just a slow giving in to what had already been circling us. She invited me over because her kitchen light wouldn't stop flickering. That was the reason. She said it like she was asking for help with the weather. I brought a new bulb. We both pretended that mattered. It was late. Not dangerously so. Just late enough that the world felt narrowed. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge. She stood at the counter while I fixed the light, arms folded, watching without really watching. When I finished, the room brightened. Too bright. She reached up and dimmed it slightly. That small adjustment felt telling. Sit, she said, nodding to the table. We didn't eat. Just sat there, across from each other, hands wrapped around mugs that had gone cold. I noticed the way she breathed, slow and deliberate, like she was keeping herself steady on purpose. I've been thinking about what you said, she began. About not wanting to ruin anything. I nodded. I still don't. She gave a small smile. Neither do I. But I think pretending this is nothing might already be doing that. The truth sat between us. Plain. Unembellished. I don't need promises, she continued. Or big decisions tonight. She paused, eyes on the table. I just need to stop lying to myself about why it's hard to let you leave. I felt that land everywhere at once. I don't want to be careless, I said. With you. With anyone. She looked up then. Really looked. I know. That's why this feels safe. Even when it shouldn't. We didn't move closer. We didn't have to. The space felt chosen now, not avoided. After a while, she reached across the table and touched my hand. Just rested her fingers there. No pressure. No pull. My hand stilled under hers, like any movement might break something fragile. Her thumb brushed my knuckle once. Absent. Thoughtful. I don't know what happens next, she said. And I'm not asking you to solve that. I'm okay with not knowing, I replied. And I was. She nodded, relieved by something unspoken. We stayed like that, hands touching, the room holding us quietly. At some point, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against my shoulder. Not dramatic. Just tired. I didn't wrap my arms around her. I let her choose the contact. She exhaled, long and slow, like she'd been holding that breath for weeks. When she pulled back, she looked steadier. So did I? It's late, she said. Yeah. I stood. She walked me to the door. No hesitation this time. No pause that hurt. Just a shared understanding that something had shifted into place. At the threshold, she squeezed my hand once. Gentle. Certain. Thank you, she said. For what? I asked. For staying, she replied. Without taking more than I was ready to give. I left quietly. Drove home, without music. Without rushing. Some things don't need to be claimed loudly to be real. I'm telling this from some distance now. Not years. Just enough time for the edges to soften and the lessons to stop feeling like open wounds. People always want to know what happened next. They want a clean answer. We didn't explode anything. We didn't disappear into a fantasy either. What we did was quieter than that. We kept choosing honesty in small ways. I told my girlfriend the truth, carefully, before lies had a chance to rot things. It hurt. It mattered. It ended the way things that are already loosening tend to end. Without villains. Just with loss and relief tangled together. She didn't rush into anything with me. That surprised people. It surprised me too. She stayed deliberate. Protective of herself in a way that wasn't closed off anymore. She stopped apologizing for needing time. I stopped mistaking intensity for depth. We learned each other slowly. Coffee that stayed hot because neither of us talked too much. Walks that didn't need a destination. Evenings where sitting in the same room counted as enough. She still had days where she pulled back. I learned not to chase those moments. She learned I wasn't going anywhere just because she needed space. Love, I found out, doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in the form of permission. Permission to be seen without performing. Permission to want without guilt. Permission to stay. What changed most was me. I stopped measuring my worth by how urgently someone needed me. I learned that patience can be an act of care, not avoidance. That showing up quietly, consistently, can mean more than grand gestures ever could. And her? She learned that careful doesn't have to mean alone. That wanting something again doesn't erase what came before. It just proves you survived it. We never made promises we couldn't keep. We didn't rush to define what we were. We just kept choosing each other in ways that felt earned. Some nights, that meant shared silence. Some nights, it meant her head on my shoulder while the world did its thing outside the window. The title everyone clicks for still makes me smile a little. Because the truth is, the bed came later. And when it did, it wasn't a crossing of lines. It was a continuation of trust that had already been built, moment by moment, pause by pause. If there's anything I took from all of this, it's that the most meaningful connections don't shout. They don't demand. They wait. And when you finally step into them, it feels less like falling and more like standing where you were always meant to be. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?